It is a Tuesday morning somewhere in the Sea of Japan. A Japanese destroyer cuts through gray water. On its aft deck sit two steel containers, 40 feet long, connected by humming cables carrying focused electrical energy. A target drone is released into the sky. Seconds later, an invisible beam of light, 100,000 watts of concentrated photons, lances across the horizon. The drone does not explode. It does not spiral dramatically into the sea. It simply stops working, burned, finished, at a cost of just a few dollars. Welcome to the new Pacific arms race. While the world's attention has been locked on Ukraine, on the Middle East, on trade wars and political drama, something tectonic is taking shape in East Asia. A triangle of strategic tension, China, Russia, and Japan, has reached a boiling point that analysts are now calling the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoint on the planet. And every single week, it gets a little hotter. Stay with us for the next 20 minutes, because what we are about to walk you through will fundamentally change how you understand the next world crisis. If you are not yet subscribed to Daily Brief, now is the time. Hit that button, turn on notifications, because stories like this one move fast, and you do not want to be the last person in the room to understand what is happening in the Pacific. Let's begin where this story truly starts, not with Japan's laser test, not with Russian bombers over the Sea of Japan, but with a single man's obsession and a deadline that has never wavered. Xi Jinping does not hide his ambitions. In speech after speech, in official Communist Party documents, in directives handed down through the People's Liberation Army, the message is consistent and chilling. Taiwan must be reunified with the mainland. This is described in Beijing's own language as the essence of China's national revival. And in Xi's worldview, this goal must be achieved by 2049. The 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. That is 23 years from today, a countdown with a fixed endpoint. But Beijing's military establishment is not waiting until 2049 to act. According to former commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Philip Davidson, China could be ready to pursue its Taiwan objective as early as 2027. That Davidson window, as it came to be known, shaped American and Japanese defense planning for years. Defense Priority Watch, a Washington-based research organization, notes that China now operates 134 air bases within 1,000 nautical miles of Taiwan, with roughly 650 hardened aircraft shelters already built and ready. This is not a country that is bluffing. Now here is the breaking update that changes how we read all of this, and it dropped just this week. The United States intelligence community's 2026 annual threat assessment, published by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, reversed course. As reported by USNI News on March 19th, the report concluded that Beijing does not currently plan to execute an invasion of Taiwan in 2027, nor does it have a fixed timeline for achieving unification. The report stated that China prefers, quote, to achieve unification without the use of force if possible. Wait. Read that again. The Davidson window, the framework that has driven Japan's rearmament, Taiwan's coastal buildup, and America's Pacific strategy for 6 years, has just been officially retired by U.S. intelligence. But here is why that conclusion is more alarming, not less. The report was immediate to add that the People's Liberation Army is still making steady, if uneven, progress on the capabilities it would need for a Taiwan campaign. China has not stopped building. It has not stopped drilling. As Amanda Xiao of the Eurasia Group noted, Beijing has effectively set aside the invasion option for at least the next 2 years, in part because of massive purges within the PLA that have gutted its senior command structure. Xi Jinping has removed or likely removed approximately 100 high-ranking officers since 2022 in an anti-corruption sweep, according to CSIS data. A military riddled with corruption and command uncertainty does not invade a fortified island defended by the United States Navy. But here is what the intelligence community is not saying loudly enough. Analysts at the Eurasia Group and CSIS's China Power Project increasingly point to the 2030s as the real danger window, when PLA capability will have fully recovered from these purges, when new weapon systems come online, and when the political calculus in Beijing may shift. Kitch Liao, a cyber and military affairs consultant for Taiwan's Doublethink Lab, told Al Jazeera directly that the 2030s represent the consensus danger window in the intelligence community, based not on intent, but on capability. So the threat has not gone away. It has moved. And Japan, watching all of this, is not waiting to find out when. Announcement number 1. Japan's defense spending has broken every record in its post-war history. Let's go back to December 26, 2025. Japan's cabinet, under Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, approved a defense budget for fiscal year 2026, totaling 9.04 trillion yen, roughly $58 billion. As reported by Naval News and Stars and Stripes, this marks the 14th consecutive year of record-breaking defense budgets for Japan, 14 years in a row. The 2026 figure is 9.4% higher than 2025 and forms part of a 5-year defense buildup program that will bring Japan's total cumulative spending to approximately $287 billion between 2023 and 2027. Think about what that number means. $287 billion spent in 5 years by a country that 70 years ago was constitutionally forbidden from having a standing military at all. Since 1976, no Japanese cabinet had dared breach the 1% GDP ceiling that successive governments treated as nearly sacred. That ceiling is now gone, and Japan is on track, according to USNI News, to become the world's third largest defense spender, behind only the United States and China. Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi put it plainly, stating that the budget represents, quote, the minimum needed as Japan faces the severest and most complex security environment in the post-war era. The minimum. The budget received announcement number 1. Announcement number 2. Japan is acquiring the ability to reach out and touch targets 1,000 miles away. This is the part that Beijing noticed most. Japan has signed a $1.7 billion contract with the United States government to acquire 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles, Block 4 and Block 5 variants, each with a range of 1,600 kilometers. As reported by Naval News in January 2024, Japan's defense minister at the time was explicit about why the timeline had been accelerated, stating that in light of the increasingly severe security environment, Japan had determined it was necessary to bring forward its standoff defense capabilities. 3 Japanese Aegis destroyers, Chokai, Haguro, and Kirishima, have already been modified to launch Tomahawks. 2 more, Myoko and Otago, are being fitted in fiscal year 2026, according to the Naval News Defense Budget Breakdown. The remaining 3 Aegis destroyers in Japan's fleet are also slated for Tomahawk upgrades. You understand what that is. That is Japan building the ability to hold enemy territory at risk without its ships ever entering enemy weapons range. That is a counter-strike capability. Japan now has it. But the Tomahawks are just the beginning. Japan is simultaneously developing its improved Type 12 surface-to-ship missile in 3 variants: ground-launched, ship-launched, and submarine-launched. The ground-launched version, tested successfully on U.S. soil in October 2024 and again in summer 2025, already has a range exceeding 1,000 kilometers. As USNI News reported, parts of China and North Korea already fall within striking range from deployment sites on Kyushu alone. And the new 2026 budget allocated more than 970 billion yen, that is $6.2 billion, specifically to bolster Japan's standoff missile capability, including a 177 billion yen purchase of domestically upgraded Type 12 missiles. Japan is also constructing a national multi-layered coastal defense system it has named SHIELD, with $640 million allocated to its establishment in the 2026 budget. Beyond that, Japan is developing 2 hypersonic weapons programs simultaneously: a hypervelocity gliding projectile for island defense, which completed its final test launches in summer 2025, and a separate hypersonic missile platform described as flying beyond Mach 5. These weapons are designed specifically to defeat the dense air defense umbrellas China has spent decades constructing around its naval task forces. Received announcement number 2. Now here is the moment where it gets genuinely revolutionary. Announcement number 3. Japan has put a directed energy weapon on a warship, and the math of warfare just changed. On December 2nd, 2025, confirmed by Japan's Ministry of Defense and detailed extensively by Naval News and Army Recognition, Japan installed a 100-kilowatt class high-energy laser system aboard the experimental test ship JS Asuka at the Izo shipyard. This system has been in development since 2018 under Japan's Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics Agency, ATLA. The program combines domestically produced 10 kilowatt fiber lasers into a single focused 100 kilowatt beam housed in two 40-foot containerized units. Kawasaki Heavy Industries won the production contract. Now stop. Look at the economics of this. A Patriot missile costs between $3 and $4 million per shot. A Standard Missile 3 used for ballistic missile defense runs even higher. China's military doctrine for a Taiwan contingency plans to flood the battle space with thousands of cheap drones and cruise missiles in the opening hours of any conflict. The goal is to overwhelm and exhaust missile-based defenses through sheer volume. A missile-based defense has a fundamental structural problem. You run out of interceptors. The economics do not work. You simply cannot manufacture enough expensive missiles fast enough to shoot down enough cheap drones. A laser fires at the cost of electricity. ATLA stated in its own program documents that so long as sufficient electrical power is available, the system can continue engaging threats without running out of ammunition. Ground-based testing against small drones and live mortar rounds has already confirmed the system's destructive capability. Sea trials aboard JS Asuka were scheduled to begin after February 27, 2026, with live fire tests against drone targets already contracted. And Japan is not alone in the Pacific with directed energy weapons. As noted by Newsweek in December 2025, the U.S. Navy forward-deployed the laser-armed destroyer USS Preble to Japan since October 2024, equipped with a 60-kilowatt Helios system fully integrated into the Aegis combat system. The United States and Japan are now operating directed energy weapons side by side in the Western Pacific. Japan is also advancing an electromagnetic railgun program. As reported by Interesting Engineering, ATLA conducted the world's first successful ship-mounted railgun firing test in summer 2025, with a projectile fired at a real ship target. Japan's future 13 DDX destroyer class is planned to carry both railguns and high-powered lasers. According to Janes International, as reported by the National Interest, these systems would be capable of engaging high-speed targets, including incoming hypersonic weapons. If fielded, a single destroyer could fire railgun projectiles at Mach 6, targeting the very threat that China is building. This is not an incremental improvement. This is a fundamental redesign of how Japan intends to fight. Received announcement number 3. Make sure you are subscribed to Daily Brief so you don't miss the next piece of this story as it develops. Hit the bell icon right now. We are tracking this in real time. Now let's talk about what is happening north of Japan, because Tokyo is not only watching the Taiwan Strait, it is watching its own sky. Here is what happened on August 19th, 2025. Russia's Ministry of Defense confirmed that 2 Tu-95MS nuclear-capable strategic bombers, escorted by Su-35s and Su-30SMs, conducted a 6-hour patrol over the Sea of Japan. The Kremlin described it as a routine long-range aviation mission, but as reported by Army Recognition, the timing was anything but routine. The patrol came precisely as the United States and South Korea were conducting large-scale joint military exercises. The message was deliberate. This was not a one-time event. Defense Security Asia reported that in January 2025, 4 Tu-95MS bombers had already conducted a provocative patrol near Hokkaido, Japan's northern island. These flights form a consistent pattern, a drumbeat of nuclear signaling aimed directly at Tokyo. The Tu-95MS carries KH-101 nuclear-capable cruise missiles with ranges exceeding 2,500 kilometers. That is enough to strike anywhere in Japan without the aircraft ever leaving international airspace. Japan's Air Self-Defense Force scrambled F-15J interceptors to shadow the formation as it entered Japan's air defense identification zone. Russia walked right up to the line and stared. The message from Moscow could not be more explicit. Japan supports Ukraine with money, materials, and diplomatic isolation of Russia. And Russia is reminding Japan that Tokyo sits well within the range of nuclear missiles. This creates what defense analysts describe as a two-front pressure campaign, China threatening from the south, Russia probing from the north, For a nation that constitutionally renounced war in 1945, it is an extraordinary position to be in, and then there is the weapon that most people still do not want to talk about. On November 1st, 2025, Russia launched a new submarine, not a conventional attack vessel, not a ballistic missile submarine of the kind that has existed for decades. The Khabarovsk, a Project Aero 9851 nuclear-powered special-purpose submarine, was launched at the Sevmash shipyard in Severodvinsk. It exists for one purpose: to carry and deploy the Poseidon 2M39 nuclear torpedo. As detailed in the U.S. Naval Institute's Proceedings Journal in January 2026, the Khabarovsk was designed from scratch around the Poseidon system. It carries 6 of these autonomous nuclear-powered underwater drones, each between 65 and 80 feet long. The Poseidon operates at depths of up to 3,000 feet at speeds estimated at around 70 knots. In October 2025, President Vladimir Putin personally announced a successful test of the Poseidon's nuclear power unit, stating publicly that Russia had, for the first time, managed to launch it from a carrier submarine and activate its nuclear power unit under operational conditions. The Poseidon is not designed to destroy a ship. It is designed to destroy a coast. Equipped with a nuclear warhead estimated between 2 and 100 megatons by various sources, it is built to detonate near a shoreline, generating a massive radioactive tsunami capable of rendering coastal cities uninhabitable for generations. Russia is moving this capability into the Pacific. The strategic signal could not be clearer. If you intervene against our interests, we can flood your cities. Not with soldiers, not with missiles, with radioactive water. This is the environment Japan has woken up inside, and here is where it becomes genuinely remarkable. Because Japan's response is not panic, it is transformation. For 7 decades, Japan operated under the constraints of its pacifist constitution, a framework born from the ashes of World War II that formally renounced the right of belligerency. Defense spending was capped at 1% of GDP. Japan could only defend itself. It could not strike first. That framework is now being systematically dismantled. Since 1976, no Japanese cabinet had breached the 1% ceiling. That ceiling is now gone. According to USNI News, Japan's total defense spending for fiscal year 2025 already reached approximately 11 trillion yen, exceeding 2% of GDP. An achievement that was not supposed to happen until 2027. It happened now, 2 years ahead of schedule, under pressure from Washington and strategic reality alike. Japan's current national security strategy, adopted in 2022, names China as the country's biggest strategic challenge and calls for a more assertive role for the military within the U.S.-Japan alliance framework. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi went even further last November, stating publicly that Japan's military could get involved if China were to take action against Taiwan, calling such a scenario a survival-threatening situation for Japan. Beijing responded with fury. China's foreign ministry issued diplomatic and economic countermeasures. Japan did not back down. That is new. That matters. So where does this leave the ordinary person watching this unfold from a distance? If you live anywhere around the Pacific Rim, and if your work touches semiconductors, electronics, shipping, energy, or financial markets, this is not an abstraction. This is already affecting the world you live in. Taiwan produces roughly 90% of the world's most advanced computer chips. The Taiwan Strait handles approximately 1/5 of global maritime trade. A conflict in that corridor does not stay in the corridor. It reaches your supply chains, your investment portfolio, your fuel costs, and your economy within days. The 2026 U.S. Intelligence Threat Assessment was explicit about this. It stated that even without Washington's direct involvement, a conflict over Taiwan would cause significant and costly consequences for U.S. and global economic and security interests, with tech supply chains disrupted and investor fear spreading across markets. A protracted war with U.S. involvement, the report added, risks unprecedented economic costs to the U.S., Chinese, and global economies simultaneously. Nobody wins. And yet both sides keep building. Now here is the deeper strategic picture, because Japan is not acting alone. And that may be the most important development of all. America's response to the Pacific crisis is playing out on multiple levels simultaneously. U.S. Marines equipped with anti-ship missiles have been stationed on the remote islands of Okinawa, turning the first island chain into what analysts describe as a fortified maritime barrier. Japan's deployment of medium-range surface-to-air missiles on Yonaguni Island, confirmed by Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi in November 2025, places Type 03 Chusam batteries on Japan's westernmost territory, just 110 kilometers from Taiwan's eastern coast, interlocking with Patriot PAC-3 units on Miyako Island and Aegis destroyers operating in adjacent waters. These systems create overlapping engagement zones spanning from Taiwan to Okinawa. As Army recognition analyzed, Chinese air and naval forces simply cannot operate freely in that corridor. The strategic alliance in the Pacific is widening in ways that would have been unimaginable 10 years ago. Australia, once cautiously neutral toward China, announced in August 2025 that it had ordered 11 improved Mogami-class frigates from Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Australia is simultaneously building nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS agreement with the United States and the United Kingdom. These Virginia-class boats will patrol the Indo-Pacific and provide alliance partners with deep-water strike options that China cannot easily counter. South Korea, despite decades of historical tension with Japan rooted in the Second World War, is now forming a closer security alignment with Tokyo against shared threats from North Korea and an increasingly aggressive Russia. The South Korean KF-21 fighter program adds another highly capable platform to the regional balance. Even the Philippines, a country that evicted U.S. military bases in 1991, has fundamentally reversed course. In April 2025, Reuters reported that Manila received a second batch of BrahMos supersonic anti-ship missiles from India. And in February 2025, Naval News confirmed the Philippines announced plans to procure submarines for the first time in the nation's history. Japan is also in active informal consultations with Manila about exporting Type 03 surface-to-air missile systems, which could extend the defensive network southward into the South China Sea. A democratic arc of deterrence is being forged across the Indo-Pacific, stretching from Seoul through Tokyo to Canberra, underpinned by American military power and increasingly capable indigenous forces. And here is the bitter irony that Beijing's strategists are beginning to face. Russia's nuclear coercion and China's own military expansion may be the very forces that forged this coalition. A CSIS analysis published in late 2025 concluded that Beijing's divide-and-rule strategy for the Indo-Pacific is beginning to fail. Rather than keeping democracies fragmented and mutually suspicious, China's military buildup and Russia's nuclear signaling have accelerated the exact convergence Beijing most feared. Historical wounds between Japan and South Korea that persisted for 80 years are healing, not out of sentiment, out of survival, in the face of shared threats from Pyongyang and Moscow. That is strategic irony of historic proportions. China's doctrine for Taiwan depends on speed. Military analysts have extensively described Beijing's blitzkrieg logic. China knows a prolonged war against the United States, and Japan is unwinnable. Its economy depends on maritime trade. A naval blockade enforced over months would devastate Chinese industrial output. Therefore, Beijing's plan has always been to move with overwhelming speed, crush Taiwan's defenses, establish control of the Strait, and present the world with an irreversible fait accompli before American carriers can respond. But the speed window is narrowing. Every Tomahawk deployed to a Japanese destroyer, every laser system undergoing sea trials, every Harpoon battery defending Taiwan's coastline, every Type 03 battery on Yonaguni, every Marine anti-ship missile battery dug into Okinawa. All of these systems are adding days, then weeks, to the time it would take China to secure a clean military outcome. And in a conflict with this coalition, days equal defeat. The 2023 CSIS war game on a Taiwan contingency found that in a conventional conflict, the United States and its allies could prevent a successful Chinese amphibious invasion, but at significant cost. The study reported that in the base case, China would lose approximately 138 ships. Japan's expanding arsenal is designed to make those Chinese losses even more severe, faster, and from longer range. The question Beijing must answer is this: is unification worth the destruction of the PLA Navy? And now here is where the intelligence picture becomes especially delicate. Because the 2026 U.S. Annual Threat Assessment, the one that retired the Davidson window, also contained a warning that few headlines picked up. the anti-corruption purges inside the PLA that have undermined China's near-term invasion capability are not permanent. As Amanda Hsiao of Eurasia Group said clearly, Beijing has set aside the invasion option for at least the next 2 years. 2 years, not forever. The intelligence community consensus, as articulated by Taiwan security consultants to Al Jazeera, is that the 2030s represent the real timeline, not because Beijing intends it now, but because that is when capability will have fully recovered and consolidated. China is not stopping. It is pausing to rebuild its command structure. And when that rebuild is complete, the deterrent architecture currently being assembled across the Pacific needs to be finished, reinforced, and credible. Right now, it is not finished. This is the paradox at the heart of everything. Building deterrence is the rational strategy, but the act of building it may accelerate the very scenario it is meant to prevent. As Japan grows stronger, as Taiwan gets harder to crack, as the U.S. deepens its commitment, the window for a quick, decisive Chinese military operation narrows. And a narrowing window creates pressure, not toward patience, toward urgency. I see 2 paths from here. Path 1, the deterrent holds. Japan's lasers, hypersonics, and tomahawks combine with Taiwan's coastal warfare command and American naval presence to make the cost of military action so prohibitive that Beijing continues to pursue its Taiwan objective through economic coercion, political pressure, and gray zone tactics. The 2030s pass. The PLA modernizes, but so does the alliance. The competition becomes chronic, expensive, tense, but not kinetic. This is the best-case scenario. Its condition is that the deterrent architecture gets fully built before the window reopens. That is a race with no clear finishing line. Path 2, the spiral, a miscalculation, a gray zone incident, a collision at sea, a drone downed, a cable cut, that triggers an escalation neither side fully intended, or a moment when Beijing calculates that the alliance is at its weakest, a U.S. political crisis, an economic shock, a moment of division, and decides the window may never be more open. The CSIS war game showed the alliance could win, but at a cost measured in ships, aircraft, and lives on a scale not seen since the Second World War. Nobody wins. Everybody bleeds. I think the deterrent is working, for now, but I thought the same thing about European security in 2021, and then February 24th, 2022 happened. This is the moment Daily Brief exists to track. Subscribe now if you have not already. Ring that bell. Leave us a comment below, because what happens in the Pacific is not a story for military analysts and defense journalists alone. It is the story of whether the world your children inherit is stable or not. And here are the questions I want you to sit with. Is the West building deterrence fast enough to close the window before China's PLA recovers from its internal purges? Or is the pace of Allied rearmament creating exactly the urgency that could force Beijing's hand before the 2030s? Japan's prime minister has publicly said a Chinese action against Taiwan would be a survival-threatening situation for Japan. That is a declaration, not a warning. What does it mean for the next decade if Tokyo is now committed to defense of the Taiwan Strait? And the deepest question of all, the Poseidon submarine is real. The Khabarovsk has been launched. Russia has a weapon designed to drown coastal cities in radioactive water. It is being moved toward the Pacific. Is deterrence of a weapon like that even possible? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one. This is Daily Brief, and this story is not over. It is just beginning.